Hello, welcome to the July 28th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream. And if you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, Cubase AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs. Also, if you could specify which version number, so if it's version 11 or 12 or 10, 10.5, and which operating system, that information is always helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to keep up with the live chat may soon be eclipsed. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid repeating the same questions over and over again, that would be appreciated. And we should have all the topics indexed, and it might be tomorrow morning for this live stream because I have to go to kind of a rehearsal directly after our Zoom meetup. So maybe later tonight, later than usual, or early tomorrow morning for the index. So just a quick heads up, today is the last live stream of the month, and so we usually do a Zoom meetup, which will start in about 2 hours, and I already posted a link to the Zoom. So looking forward to catching up with people, seeing familiar faces, and meeting some new people. And it's just a way for people that attend the live streams to get together and meet and get to know each other and socialize a little bit. It's always a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to it every month. So if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create that site for us. We also have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. We want to thank them for their efforts. They're not Steinberg employees, they just do it to make it a better community, and I applaud all their efforts. Also, a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his Cubase Nation Discord and putting that together. It's very relevant for different tutorials and kind of collected in a central location for the benefit of the Steinberg community. And once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today, and I'm presenting from United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. So with that, we will go ahead and get started with the first question. So there's one question got cut off that I kind of copied and pasted. So the first question was, hey Greg and all Cubasers, when I make a melody and duplicate the melody, every part is unique. Is there a shortcut key so that I could change all parts at once? Greetings from Croatia. So let's say I have just a little melodic figure here. And when we do a copy, we could do what's called a shared copy. We could, if we grab it by the edge here while holding down the shift key, we can just drag this out and we'll see this little equal sign in the upper right hand corner of the event. So now you'll see that when I edit one particular, like one of the events, and I'll make this a little larger so it's easier to see. So within the editor here, I'm going to take these particular events and I'm just going to change the notes. We'll see that the changes I make in this editor will be reflected here and in all of the shared copies. So we'll come and adjust the pitch. And we can see that all those changes. So once again, just to do that, if you go to the right edge, and what you want to do is hold down the shift key, go to the right center edge and drag it out, and then that will create shared copies. That's probably the easiest way to do it, and then all those changes will take effect across multiple events. All right, let me just go to All right, so we have Uno Memento from Finland, joining us from rainy Finland, who's back from his vacation and business trip to Estonia. So great to see you on. We have Stefan from Sweden. We have Matt Elston from London. All right, so we have A Lower God just checking in from Croatia. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Great to see you on. All right, so we see from a question from Dallas LaRue, the tube compressor has an internal sidechain on it. What's the difference between an internal and an external sidechain? So I think the sidechain functionality will be identical. Let me just open it up. Whether you're on, so a lot of times it may be, I think it may be kind of similar terminology, and it's sometimes it may be referred to as. So I'll just come over here. Let's open up the tube compressor. All right, so now that we come over here, so I believe that when we activate this sidechain, that what it's going to be is, we have the plugin itself can have internal sidechaining that is sidechain from an external source. So as soon as I activate the sidechaining here, we can go to another track, and we'll go to, let's say, our sends. And as we go to our sends, we could, so once we have, so let me just check this real quick. Okay, so it looks like when we have the internal sidechain here that we could just, have different filters for the frequency for the sidechaining. And then when we want to have external sidechaining, this is when another track could be the sidechain input. So we could do kind of processing within the plugin itself. But you could also just activate sidechaining directly from another track, and that would be the external. All right. Great to see Jazz Dude on. All right, so we have Samag Engineering, Mixing and Mastering Engineer on, saying hi to everyone. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Rich Schweitzers from still hot West Palm Beach. Glad you could join us. Okay, so we have Vanja asks, I just see Dolby Atmos tips. So if you're just kind of starting off a particular project, so let's say I'll just have a simple guitar part. There is a setup utility. So what I'm going to do, let's say I have just a stereo guitar part. And I want to set up my project to be in Dolby Atmos. First thing you want to do is go to your project setup and make sure that you're at 48K for the project. We want to also make sure that your buffer is set to, when we go to your control panel, that the buffer is set to 512 samples. And if we go to our project menu, we can now just say, we want to go to the ADM authoring setup for Dolby Atmos. Let's go to the setup assistant. And basically we could just kind of check the 3 items here and create the beds as by default. It's an easy way of doing it. And unless you have like a 7.14, if you have 12 speakers to monitor, we don't have to do down mixing. But if you're doing it with headphones, which is most common, we could just do binaural monitoring. And now when we want to do panning, we'll open up the channel. And let's go to the channel, edit the channel settings and open up the panner. Once we open up the panner, we could enable kind of our height over here. And now we could, as we automate our particular channel, we could just say, okay, we want to automate. And as I play, if you're wearing headphones, hear kind of the source spinning around. So you could do this for each of your tracks, do panning. And then once you're done, go to your project setup, and you want to go to, again, the ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos. And if you wanted to export the ADM file, just click right there, and that will export the ADM file so that it could be played back in your different Dolby Atmos environments. All right, so we see Gerd Grobosh just saying hello. We have XTC Tunes says, hi Greg, I have an Akai APC Mini. I'd like to use the fader to control MIDI CC, such as MIDI CC1, 11, 64. Could you please show us how to do it? Thanks. So usually, when it's coming in, what I would do is go to a MIDI track, because usually it's not set up in Cubase. It's going to be set up in the Akai software. So the knobs will generally kind of transmit different components. So let's say we have a instrument track here, or a MIDI track. And what I want to do is go to the MIDI modifiers, or MIDI inserts, and we'll go to MIDI monitor. All right, and then just move whatever fader device you have, and you can see what controller it's transmitting. So like I have a Chord Nano control, and just to kind of show you, and there's probably similar software. So Cubase will accept whatever MIDI data is coming in. The best way to do this is to actually have the controller transmit. So you could probably set it up. I have a Nectar Panorama in front of me, and I could set that up to transmit particular MIDI controllers. But if I wanted to come over here, let's say I have my Chord Nano control, and I'll just show you what's kind of a typical, you may have like an editor software. Realize that Cubase is going to accept whatever is transmitted to it. But when you go to like your Chord Nano control here, you could define like what controllers are going to be transmitted for the particular device. So it's outside of Cubase, and what you want to do is to basically within the device itself set it up to transmit on the particular CCs that you want, and just about all of the controllers allow you to change that. So give that a shot. All right, so we see Value checking in from Vienna. Thanks for joining us today. And we have Craig Nobles from West Virginia, so not too far from you, one state away. All right, and we have Gothic Melancholy, great name, just saying hello. We have Soren from Sweden. He's still fighting for making a hit, so. All right, so we see, why can't I increase volume using the pencil tool? So if it's on a particular event, we have just, so if we're doing the pencil tool on events, we could go up to 0 dB here. If it is going to be like for volume automation, depending where your fader is set to, if you go to your project setup, so we'll go to project setup, and we could choose like a volume max of +6 or +12, and then if you go to the automation, you could go up to +12 dB over 0 if needed. But realize that this is going to be that it's this is not intended to it's intended for volume changes, but not to add more gain. If you wanted to add more gain, you could simply select the clip, and if you go to the top center, you can add an additional 24 dB of gain directly there within the clip gain. So if you're doing kind of the dynamics, this is considered like pre-gain, and it's not intended to go above 0, but to have different volume changes. So if you needed to add gain, you could use the automation tracks, or just simply use the clip gain. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from value, can I extract MIDI for different drums from a single drum loop? Example, one MIDI track for snare, kick, etc. All the love and thanks for this. So let's say we want to jump back. Let's see if I have this one project open. All right, so if you have spectral layers, you could do this kind of stuff, but let's take a look at a couple of different choices here. Okay, so if you have the kind of the full version of Groove Agent, so let's say we have like drum loop like this. Okay, so if we open up kind of a full, and Groove Agent could have, so there's a couple of different approaches to this. So let's say we open up, if you have the full version of, we'll start with what you could do with Groove Agent SE. All right, so now once we have this loop on a pad, we can now go to our slice menu and we'll create slices. So now what this has done is mapped each slice and it's created a pattern pad. So if I want to drag this pattern out, we can now just listen to, and it's basically just a chromatic that's going to trigger that particular pattern. So that's what some of the stuff that we could do inside. We also, if you have the full version of Groove Agent, so I mean that will allow you to kind of break down MIDI, you know, from a drum loop. But there's also kind of a way to classify. Let me just. I've forgotten how this works, but there is a way to basically, you know, where it could kind of break down the kicks and snares, and you know, and you could just choose to use one particular snare. So there is, in the full version, there's a class of a way to kind of link the common sounds together. I forget how to get it going, but another method you could do is using spectral layers. And if you have spectral layers Pro 10, which you could try out on 30-day trial version, I'll just come here and let's take that drum loop and let's unmix the drums. So now that we come over, we could just say, okay, I want to just solo the kick. And let's go ahead and bring in like the snare. And now let's say hi-hat. And if I wanted to take that kick and drag it in, let's say I just want to, once we have this done, we could drag it and create new files. So let's grab my snare. And if you wanted to, at this point, just go to the hit points. So say I wanted to take these files. Let's go to audio. I'm just going to do a quick bounce selection. And now at this point, we could double click and create MIDI notes. So we could just come right over here, say, okay, let's create MIDI notes from those particular slices. We'll do it. And we'll retain our dynamics. I'll create a new MIDI track. Okay. And then if I wanted to do the same thing for the snare, find our hit points and create a new, we'll create MIDI notes, and I'll just put it on a new MIDI track so we could have our kick and snare and hi-hat. And then if I wanted to just drag those over top of each other, and I'll grab my glue gun and hold down my Alt or Option key, and now we could have kind of both events. So that's another way of doing it. Let me know if that makes sense. So there's a couple ways to approach it. All right, so we see Yamin asks, how can I reverse scrolling using the mouse wheel as it is reversed in Windows? So to change the direction of the mouse scroll wheel, it's actually going to be set in your operating system. So if you go to the Windows, go into your mouse settings and change it to, and toggle the behavior, then it will change. So I know it could seem a little counterintuitive, but that's how it works with that. All right, so we have Eric Peterson checking in from Oklahoma City. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Ivan checking in from Ukraine. It says last time he asked about the click in empty space in all editors. I just forgotten. I know about the Shift Alt command and click would be possible and update without the keyboard hold. I'll pass it along, but a lot of times, like when you're clicking in editors, it's kind of designed to to select particular events. And you could always just kind of click here, but if you needed the option of Alt-Shift to move, you could do it like that, and that's kind of consistent throughout the program, but I'll pass it along regardless. All right, so we see from Patrick Manuel A. Hi, Greg. About a previous live question, changing the first chord, an entire following chord follow that. So if we want to do it, like let's say, I'm not sure if it's the chord track or chord pads, but if we want to transpose like all from the chord pads, I can come over here and I think there's just transpose all pads. So say I want to go up a major second. So again, if you click here we can say transpose all pads. We can go down major second. And if it's on the chord track, just go to a different project that has some chord track data on it. So let's say we have chord track. So if let's say I'm in the key of G here and I want to shift double click, at this point we could change our root key, and as I would just change my root key here, all of the chord tracks can automatically transpose like that. So let me know if that makes sense for you. Okay, so you see from Yaman, why aren't you adding the ability to zoom vertically using the mouse wheel? It's a simple thing to program. So, I know it's been a long-standing feature request. I don't actually do any of the development, but I passed it along many times, but hopefully we can maybe see something in the future, but I know it's been passed along. All right, so we see from Andy Gray, says, hey Greg, can't work out how to solo track and not have the other tracks that have mute automation also get soloed. I'm finding a track that has mute automation get soloed even without it being soloed. So I ran into something similar with a friend of mine, Gant Kushner, and we're kind of going over this on Facebook. So, and the one thing that I found is, he had kind of repeated entries. I don't want to. He sent a project, but it may be copywritten, and I don't want to play it. All right, so I'll just drop in a couple loops here. Okay, so we'll listen to kind of first this track. All right, let me just find something that's different sounding. Okay. Okay, so what I had found with the particular project was, so let's say I come over here and I'll do mute automation on this particular. So okay. So let's say I want to take this and I'm going to automate mutes on it. So while this is going on, I'm just going to come right over here. So I automate it and I click on mutes. All right, so now when we go back, we'll play back our mute automation. So now I want to solo this track. And we can see that the mute automation is going on. And this isn't being affected. Now, what I had noticed, Gant had sent me a project, and I think he was drawing in mute automation. And when you looked at it, mute automation is kind of on or off. And I'm not sure if it was his process, but he would have like 4 repeated on messages in the mute automation. So I haven't been able to really recreate that, but see if you have multiple entries for, because this should be kind of on off, like a binary. And then I found that as soon as we took away the mute automation, it had 4 mute ons or 4 mute offs in a row, multiple of the same value, as opposed to being kind of on or off, that the solo worked fine. So if you could let us know how you're automating if you're drawing in the mute automation, or if you're automating it from a particular controller, or if you're automating it just by hitting the mute button, or let me know if I'm doing it differently than you. Give that, let me know if that is kind of what you're doing, or how you're actually writing in mute automation that's causing it. All right, so we see Razel checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have Steve Leeds checking in from the city by the bay. All right, so we see Patrick Manuel A asks, Greg, global copy paste shared copy. All right, so let's say if I want to take all of this, and let's do a global. So I will come over to my range, and we'll do a global copy. So, and now if I just paste, so I'm going to do Alt or Option, or I'm sorry, Control or Command plus Shift plus V. All right, so here, let me just. All right, so let me set the left and right locators around all of this. And I'll just go ahead and add tempo. Okay, so it's going to range. And let's see if we could. So it doesn't look like there's a shared copy for that, but you could, select all events, and then again, just hold down Shift, and then, that would. So it looks like, because maybe the tempo changes aren't going to be shared. So if we wanted to come here, if we make this change, so let's say I want to, all right, so, because the tempo changes are always going to be linear and not events, that's why when we come over and make a copy, so if these tempo events aren't going to change, so the tempo events can't be shared because they're going to be kind of happening strictly in a linear fashion, but the events can be shared. So it's not going to. I don't think it's going to do a global copy and paste because not all the parameters are going to be able to be updated like individual events. All right, so we see question, what is the equivalent of an 1176 compressor in terms of Cubase stock plugins? I would check out the vintage compressor. So I think this one would get you there. So that would be probably the closest one to a 1176. All right, so Patrick is asking, is there a Zoom meeting today? Any special today? So there will be a Zoom meeting. We don't have a special guest. I'll go ahead and paste the Zoom meetup credentials, the link for it. So I just pasted it again. All right, so we have Tone Vision Ton Studio saying hi, and we have Nanook Brazzers saying hello to everyone. All right, we have Peter from Montreal saying greetings. All right, so we see please add a functionality in the folder tracks to be able to act as a group channel, and also an option to make all tracks under folder track be the same color as the folder. So if you have a number of tracks, you know, because our folder tracks are different in that they actually can contain parts that don't pass audio. So let's say if I duplicate these tracks here, but there is kind of a macro that comes with Cubase that will allow you to kind of do this pretty easily. So let's say I want to take all of these particular tracks. So let's say I have a number of tracks, and I'll just close my automation lanes here. Okay, so I want to take these tracks. If you go to, and my macro list is larger, so don't be intimidated by it, but you could just say selected tracks to folder and add group channel. So we'll say, okay, this is our drum bus, and then everything is going to be created. So, and if you wanted to, you could even create a project logical editor, you know, but if you select all these events here and just say, okay, now I just want them all the same color, you could just do it in, you know, once the events are selected, just one mouse click to change all the colors. So, but again, you know, the folders can contain transpose tracks, signature tracks, tempo tracks, video tracks, lots of different things, arranger tracks that don't pass audio. So that's why there's not a strict correlation and why you have the flexibility. All right, we see from Dallas LaRue, his question is, should I keep snap to zero crossing on anytime I am copying or duplicating measures? Is there any disadvantage to keeping it on all the time? So there's no disadvantage. Most people will have this snap to zero crossings enabled all the time just as a safety net. So there's no real consequences, but realize that if you needed to do some editing near the sample level, if it doesn't get that precise, you're like, oh, I can't cut exactly where I need to when I'm zoomed in, that at that point, if you need to have a finer resolution for the edit, that you could just turn the snap to zero crossings off. All right, so we see Michael Pierce. He's getting ready to, he's bouncing files and typing up a soup recipe. So that sounds great. Great to see you, Michael, on from outside of London from Chapel Studios. So we see question, does Very Audio have a function to auto-tune? So it's not, you know, it's, you could, you know, it's not exactly this, you know, depends what your definition is of auto-tune, but if you wanted to quickly, let's say I have all these files here in this particular project, and let's say it's our vocal file, and these are, I'll just, for simplicity's sake here, I'm just going to say we'll bounce selection. So what a lot of people will do is come over to Very Audio, and if you want it to, you know, so this is more kind of like a graphic mode, but if you select all, if you want it to be like, you know, super, you know, easy, you could just simply select all of the segments, and then you could just quantize, you could just come right over here and correct pitch, and you could do that. Now if you wanted it to be, so this is more, Very Audio will be more kind of like a graphic editing environment. If you wanted something where you just wanted to throw a plugin on and have that do the tuning for you, what you could do is go to the inserts, and you'll see under pitch shift where you could have pitch correct, and here you could set the key. So you say, okay, I want it to be a, based on the chord track or based on an external MIDI scale. You could just come directly over here and have this automatically kind of just put it on and have it correct pitch for you. But we can think of Vari Audio as being more of an editing approach to it. Okay, so we see from Patrick Manuel A, I saw in a video there's a keyboard shortcut to make chord strum. So usually when I do strumming, what I would do is just come over here. So let's say I just want to take this and let's get to my project menu. We'll get to the chord track and I will say chords to MIDI. And then I just use the line tool and hold down, I think it's just the Alt key, and then you could just come over here if you wanted to kind of mimic strums. So hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you could just come over here and just do different strums however you wanted to do it. So, and then you could change it so it's not all the same. So I don't know of a key command for that other than using that tool. But maybe someone else has created like a logical editor preset as well. All right, great to see DL White. He's mixing and watching. Always wonderful to see Sable Winters. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Lars. He says, hi Greg, I have 2 MIDI tracks marked with 2 little lines. When I share something in one of the tracks, it automatically changes the other track. How can I change that so I can work on them separately? Okay, so let's say if I come here and I'm just going to duplicate this particular track. All right, so it could be that these are grouped together. So maybe it's like Control G. So if I do an edit here, that it's going to be applied to both of them. If I move one, they're both going to move. So if you select both of the events or just selecting one, because they'll both be selected, hit Control or Command plus the letter U for ungroup. So Control G, Control or Command G will be group, Control or Command U will be ungroup, and then they could be edited independently like that. So let me know if that's helpful and does a trick for you. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A says, Greg, do composers use chord tracks? If so, how they use and for what would it be helpful? I thought it was for songwriters, but I just wanted to ask you. So yeah, I've seen composers do it because a lot of times, if you have hundreds of tracks, it could get to the point where, the director comes in, and I actually saw this happen in real life with a composer. So say, okay, we'll just try this. So if they want to change the chords across large numbers of tracks easily, the chord track is really good for that. And the scenario I came in was, the director came in, and I just happened to be in the studio that day, and they're like, so we'll just get some tonality here. And And the director is like, oh, can you make it sadder? And, you know, it's literally hundreds of tracks. So what they're able to do is just come over here and say, oh, let's listen to this. And let's say, okay, I want to take this chord, and we're going to be in the key of G. So let's say I want to stop and make that like an E minor chord. We'll go to the relative minor chord. So just trying out different ideas by putting a different chord in without having to go through hundreds of tracks. So, you know, a lot of composers maybe were doing this long before the chord track was available, but, you know, in that situation, the composer was able just to kind of change a chord and have every track automatically compensate and match, you know, to get a sad mood for the director. It's like they read about a minor chord and wanted to see if the composer knew about it. So yeah, the chord track is very helpful for composers. Okay, so we have RB World Music. Hello, Greg. Would recording at 88K sample rate or 96K sample rate with 32-bit float make a difference in audio quality, or do you have to have the new Yamaha sound card that uses 32-bit float? So the new Yamaha sound cards, the UR series and the AXR series, they're not limited to 32-bit float. It's a 32-bit integer. So, you know, with 32-bit float, you know, is basically a 24-bit recording that has extra space to accommodate additional information that's often introduced by adding plugins, EQs, compressors, reverbs, so that you can have the full 24-bit resolution, have extra space for the, you have extra space to accommodate the new information of the DSP processing, like the real-time effects, without having to truncate or diminish the original audio recording quality. So any 24-bit interface, you could record at 32-bit float, and when you benefit is when you start adding plugins and mixing. So the new audio interfaces from Cubase allow you to have 32-bit integer recording, which does sound better. It could be subtle, but it does sound better, and that would allow you to work with the mix engine at 64-bit floating point to have even better quality. But any 24-bit interface could do 32-bit float, and there's, I think, a smattering of other 32-bit integer interface converters that are available in the market now. But it was really the Steinberg interfaces were the first ones to do it on kind of a mass level. All right, so we have Captenergy Music checking in from like outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you on as always. We have a question from Craig Nobles. Hey Greg, is there a difference in the effects in the channel strip and those that you would use in the insert rack? Why would you use one over the other? So, you know, sometimes you may want to, you know, if you have a particular, let's add an audio track here. So, you know, some people who come from the perspective of a large format console where the console itself would have, and, you know, if you have like a larger Neve, SSL, API, etc., you know, it's common that every channel would have a noise gate. Every channel would have a built-in compressor, would have a built-in EQ, and then, you know, what's not common in large format consoles is having limiters. You may also have particular analog or tape saturation, you know, or kind of like an analog sound to a large format console. And you could also do like de-essing on vocals. So what this allows you to do is to have all these processors, and we could, you know, easily change the order of these processors without having to load up 6 different plugins. So if you're doing a really large, extensive mix, you could use all of these in addition to a whole 16 other plugins. So the processing will basically be the same. It just presents it in a more unique, compact, user-friendly, And the workflow is superior doing this rather than juggling 6 independent windows that are floating around your screen. But if you haven't used the built-in channel strip, do. There's lots of great stuff in there. You see Sable Winters, she thought today was Thursday. So tomorrow is just going to be awesome for you then. But we're glad that you can make the live stream. All right, then we have Lucky Strike saying hi, guys. Okay, so we see Patrick Emanuel A says, Greg, to set up a setting like if I copy plugins, the automation should also be copied with the plugin. So I think a lot of times that that doesn't work in a lot of different scenarios. So if we have plugins that are automated, where the automation. So let's say if I open up this particular plugin, I go to inspector here. Let's get to all right, and I'm automating a particular plugin. All right, so this automation data isn't with the particular plugin. The automation data resides and lives in the particular track. So you could copy this automation. So, if I copied this insert to another plugin, to another track, I could copy those particular, that particular automation to that track. But the automation itself, it's just values that go to a plugin that's on that track. So when we copy a plugin, we're not copying the automation data because the plugin is really independent of automation. We can think of the plugin as the vehicle that plays back the automation that's on the track. But that's why copying a plugin doesn't necessarily translate over to it. And a lot of times what could happen is, it's going to be different if you're copying to a different track. The sound sources are going to be different, and it probably, will more than likely not work or make sense. But the automation data is on the track, and again, it will send the signal back to the plugin, but the plugin itself does not host the automation. All right. So we see from Tone Vision Ton Studio. Hey, Greg. How can it be that the time stretch sounds so crumbly? Sounds a lot better when using musical mode. It would be nice if you didn't have to switch to another DAW for time stretch. So, it depends on what algorithm that you're using. So I think if we go to preferences and we go to editing to audio, that we could just, your default, let's see if it's set up here. So we have our default warping. Let me just see if there's, thought that there's maybe a setting where you could change the default time stretching algorithm. And let's see if I just go into my direct offline processing by hitting F7. So let's say if we do our time stretch here. So here you could choose the different algorithms for your time stretch. But let me see, I thought that there was maybe a way of setting, like I said, I'm not sure if you're just doing time stretching by going here, like the sizing applies time stretch, but let me see if there was, I thought that there was maybe a preference to set that. But also make sure that you have your kind of default warping algorithm. I'll take a look for that and maybe see if I could find it for Fridays. I thought that there was just kind of a default mode for that, but you could get to the same algorithms by going into the actual direct offline processing as well. All right, so we have Alexander Plasko. I see testing 1, 2. Hopefully you're not having problems getting a question submitted. And we see you say hello, Greg. All right. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Clear my throat. All right. All right, so we see Patrick Emmanuel A says, Greg, once I saw you're doing just click the track and you want to copy the automation. You did a keyboard shortcuts. It was copied, Alt something, I forgot. All right, so if you, like, let's say if we have automation, you know, with the event, if you go to the edit menu, you know, usually by default you have automation follows events turned on. So if I copy, you know, this particular event with the automation, that is automatically carried directly over. And then if you have the same kind of automation parameters, at this point we could select your automation parameters and copy and paste to different tracks as long as the different fields here are the same. Let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see, is ADM also working on a stereo output? When I press the setup assistant, I get the window where I can check the 3 boxes, but when I press OK, it gets something different than Greg. So, you know, you see that your buffer. So, you know, basically it's not, you know, it's not going to be using the stereo output. It's going to create a bed channel and it's going to create a group. So it's basically creating like a, you know, 712 output channel, so it's not going to use the stereo output. All right, so we see, and this is directed toward Jazz Dude from Patrick Emmanuel A. Says, what he's searching for is if his progression's in C major, I want to change the scale, and if I change it to D major, other following chords should follow in tracks. So realize, you know, just like what we showed before, let's see if I saw the Bach piece up. Yeah. So let's say we're in G major. So if I just double click and we change our root key, let's say to A, and now we could have the tracks follow, that are set to follow the chord tracks automatically do that. So just change the root key here, and then the other tracks, if they're set to follow, will follow the different changes. All right, so we have Braxel checking in from Fort Worth, and we have Ray checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see a question from Ray. Just as I'm studying sound design, I want to ask you to explain why the sidechain feature is required to be enabled in the stock multiband compressor. Doesn't seem to work without that. So we'll give it a shot here real quick. So let's say, so just revert this, and we'll put a multi-band compressor on the tracks. So we'll come. So just on my master bus, we'll just do the multi-band compressor. So it seems like it's working without that, but if you have the sidechain enabled here, that it's not going to do anything until the once you have the sidechain turned on. So make sure but it seems to work without any sidechain being on or with sidechain. So let me know if I did something differently. All right, so we have Pierre checking in from Montreal. Thanks for joining us. Miss going to Montreal. All right, so we have a question from Michelle. What is Media Bay and where is it located? So a lot of times when we're dealing with, plugins and audio files and presets and sound files, MIDI files, MIDI loops, projects, there's a lot of different types of media that is accessed within a program like Cubase. So Media Bay allows us to find all of the presets and all of the files that are relevant for Cubase. So if you go to your media menu, you could go to Media Bay. So let's say, I did this project and I can't find this particular project. So I want to go to this computer and I want to search only for projects. So we could look for video files, channel strip presets, FX chain presets, plugin presets, track presets, pattern banks, MIDI loops, MIDI files, audio files, etc. So I could just say, I'm looking for that Bach piece. I forgot where I saved it. I could just type in Bach, and at this point, just find that particular file throughout my whole hard drive. So it's kind of like a database for all of the relevant media files that can be used within Cubase or Nuendo. All right, always wonderful to see Gareth join us from Spain. Glad you can make it. All right, so we have Mark asking, which do you think is better, Cubase or Nuendo? I used Cubase for a while now, but I heard that Nuendo has better resolution. The whole setup is better. Is it true? So the audio resolution, the audio engine, everything is going to be identical. What Nuendo offers over Cubase is very specific features. And these could be critical depending on the type of work you're doing. So if you're doing post-production, it's going to have reconforming. incredible ADR functionality. If you're working with games, it's going to have, direct links and tie-ins with like Audio Kinetic Wise. Wonderful sound design. It's going to have built-in network collaboration, so multiple operators can be running the software simultaneously. So if you have 4 studios in a facility or 4 people working on a wide area network, and one person is really good at vocal editing, the other person is programming beats, the other person is mixing, you get multiple people working in kind of a network collaboration. Those type of functions are in Nuendo, but it's going to be the same sound design, the same sound resolution, the same functionality. So everything that's in Cubase is in Nuendo. Nuendo will offer more specialized tools. So if you need those tools, then Nuendo makes sense, but it has the same resolution and it's basically the same setup. If I open up Nuendo, I could probably run Nuendo for a whole club Cubase and people wouldn't notice. All right, so we see from Lawrence, he's just asking he's checking in from Rhode Island, and are we doing a Zoom today? So we are. That reminds me, I'll go ahead and share. I'll paste the link again. Hope to see people on the Zoom meetup. Gareth says, I'm the special guest. Hopefully Gareth will be our special guest. So we see from Andy Gregg just about the mute automation. Says he just did the same thing as me using the mouse and the mute button, but my automation muted track still solos when I solo another track. So if you have just a project with 2 files that you want to share with me, please feel free to share it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. You could you could use something like WeTransfer or and I'd be happy to take a look at your particular project. So we see Volker just talking about RAMs, as he started with 128 megabytes in 1990. Thinks it was an Atari, only MIDI thing. So that was probably the Ataris were, if you had a 1040 ST, that was 1 megabyte of RAM. So, and the biggest Atari had 4 megabytes. So I had a Atari had a ST4. So we see Uno Momento started with a ST2. So. All right, so we have a question from DL White. Hi, Greg. What does this mean? In editor, using pen results in message, please zoom in to a resolution lower than 1. Okay, so when you're doing the pencil tool in the editor, so we'll just come. All right, so so the pencil tool, when we switch to the pencil tool, you may get this message, please zoom into a resolution. So the pencil tool is really intended for when you have maybe a click or a pop, maybe it was an edit that you got that wasn't done at a 0 crossing. So let's say your edit looks like this, all right, and you're like, okay, and now you hear a little every time you play that through. So you need to, if we draw in, you need to be zoomed in more for the pencil tool to kind of just fix a problem like that. So the intention is that's almost near, the pencil tool is intended to be used at almost the sample level to fix different things. And if it's at a resolution that's too broad, at that point you'll get that message. So it's really intended to work, primarily almost at this resolution for the level. So that's why you get the message. Otherwise it would just draw in kind of a big in the middle of your audio file. See, Uno Mementos just talking about his Atari. He had a loaded program from the floppy disk. So I had a 20 megabyte, I had a 30 megabyte hard disk. Dare to dream. All right, so we're seeing Patrick wants a global shared copy function on Cubase 13, but realize that a global copy, has a lot of functions that aren't necessarily shareable across different things. So that's why we do have the capability of, selecting all your events and doing shared copies of the events where it makes sense. But I'll pass it along. So. So we see Sounds by Timo. Where would I save an audio sample, like an MP3 of a laugh track? If you had like a sound effect, so let's say if I come over here, let's go to my media bay, and I may have some sound effects. So let's just say I'll look for a laugh. Okay, so let's say I have a crowd laugh. Okay, so what you could do is right click and say let's create a sampler track of it. So now we can, and then if we wanted to access this, we could save it as a track preset. So say, okay, let's just come over here. We'll save a track preset and we'll call it laughter sample. And now you could just open that up into any project. So we'll go to like user presets, track presets, sampler, and then you could just have your laughter sample right there, and you could call that up. All right, so we see Lesso Site Music just saying hello to everyone, and thanks for the streaming. So you're welcome. Okay, so we have a question from Harry Olive, who asks, hi Greg, is there a Cubase 12 Pro method to remove all old VST2.dlls from a Windows system? There is a blocked list under VST instruments, but I can't create a text list of it manually. Thanks. So there isn't necessarily a tool in Cubase to do that. If you to delete DLL files, because that can be problematic in a lot of ways. But if you go to, let's say your VST plugin manager, you can see anything that's a VST 2 plugin. So if you have something like that, and then you could choose to hide VST2 plugins. So you could go through here and hide all your VST2 plugins, and they don't show up in Cubase, but there's nothing in Cubase that would go into plugin folders and delete them, that could cause all sorts of problems. Okay, so we have a question from Craig Nobles. Follow-up question. How is the channel strip routed in relation to inserts? So usually by default, the channel strip will come after the inserts. So, but let's say we have our inserts here, and we have, let's say, our channel strip, and I wanted to switch the signal flow order of them. all I would have to do is we see this little line here, and then I could click, and now the channel strip comes before the inserts, and then you could just simply click on that icon right back, and the inserts come in the signal before the channel strip. So you could change the behavior of which comes first in the signal flow. And again, this little icon where you see, so you could just kind of click directly there, and that will change the signal flow order for you. All right, so we see Rouge Screen saying it's Friday with the letter I, with the letter Y rather. Always wonderful to see Bruce Bruton from Simi Valley. Wishing everyone well on a hot Friday. So my chat field just jumped on me. All right. All right, so we have Harry Olive asks, is it possible to tame synth frequencies by vocal frequencies with sidechain? I do not want to tame volume. Thanks a lot. So, probably if you come over, if you kind of know what the frequencies are, probably the best way to do this, and, it's not going to automatically figure out kind of the frequencies, but if we go to like our frequency EQ plugin, we could find, you could look at like what frequencies are like in your vocal that is, perhaps, or, that you want to tame in your synth. So, kind of look at the frequency range, and then you could apply, once you go to the particular band here, you could choose to have this be dynamic. So at this point, we could switch to kind of your dynamic processing, and I'll just do like just a single channel. And this way we could take, a particular frequency range that we know is clashing, and then we could just choose to turn on, and we could sidechain directly from the particular, like from the vocal channel. And then at this point, we could just compress this very, well-defined EQ curve, as opposed to like a multiband compressor. Here we could adjust the Q of every single element. So, do a sidechain in from the vocal into the synth, and then you could sidechain down the frequencies. So try that. Okay. All right, so we see from Tone Vision Tone Studios, I tried all the time stretch algorithms, and unfortunately all of them are useless, even with small changes. It immediately sounds crumbly. Are there any plans to adapt this to year 2023? So it is the same algorithm that you have for the real-time time stretching that you said you liked. So it is the same algorithm. If you want to share like a particular file that you're having problems with, you could share it to me at clubcubase at steinberg.de. But you said you wanted the time stretching to sound like the audio warp algorithm, and it's the same algorithm. So, all right, wonderful to see Pindo Purba on. See that Gareth is going for dinner time, and that was 20 minutes ago. So hopefully he has a nice dinner with his daughter Lola. All right, we have Bren Hawkins checking in from New Jersey. Larry B from Brampton, Ontario. Okay. Okay, so we see from Larry B, is there a real-time harmonizer that can be triggered off the audio? I've seen lots of demos of keyboards doing harmony, but when I play solo live, can my guitar audio be put into a real-time harmonizer? So probably the best thing to do something like that might be, there isn't like an automatic harmonizer function in Cubase. I mean, I think you could do one voice. I'm not sure if it's going to do chords, but if you wanted to do, and this may involve some latency on it, but if you go to like the inserts, I think that if we go to the pitch correct, and I'll just give it a shot here in this track, and we'll see if we get. Just revert. So say we want to take. All right, so say I want to take just that little. This little part. All right, and I'll just. So say I want to take that. I'll just add a quick group channel to the guitars here. Let's see if we could do a little bit of pitch correct. Yeah, I don't think it's going to work for that. I'll see if I can come up with something, but I don't know kind of real-time plugins are included. You might be able to use vocoders. There's a number of freeware vocoders that might do the trick. But I'll do some playing around, see if I can come up with something maybe for Tuesday's live stream. All right, so we see from Plastic People Records. If I have Absolute 4 on dongle, do I need to upgrade it to go dongle free? So yeah, it's Absolute 6 that works under the new Steinberg licensing. So that's the way if you wanted to go dongle free with the Absolute 4. So. Okay, so you see from Plastic People Records, is there a way to put the transport bar at the top, preferred there? Right now, I add one, so I have two, one on top and one on bottom. Is there a way to get rid of the one at the bottom, just have at top fixed, not float? So all you have to do is, if we come over to the top, we could just say we want to add the transport controls. So you got transport there. And when you see like this, if we go to the setup window, we could just hide the transport bar at the bottom. So if you want that, that's all you have to do. So again, add the transport controls, get to the setup window, turn that on and off. So wonderful to see Millard Brown. It's great to see you on the live stream. We've missed having you on. All right, we see Nick, his dog ate his homework, but he has hit the like button. So if you have learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, so we see from Martin Severn, how do I ask a question? I can't seem to find a way doing it on the website. So all you have to do is just like how you typed that comment, just type it in the chat field. And you could, realize that there can be a character limitation and imposed by YouTube of how many characters that you could, so I think there's 200 characters. So if you have more than that, maybe just simply enter it in multiple posts. All right, so we see a question from Thomas Zaleski. Hi, Greg. How can I synchronize my Cubase project running from PC to Pro Tools session running from a Mac? I want to make Cubase the master and Pro Tools the slave. So really all you'd have to do, depending on what synchronization hardware, if you have like different sync hardware set up, like if you have an actual synchronizer, which is going to be kind of the best choice because that, and you want a synchronizer that can take like time code in and have the, time code and word clock. So if you have a hardware synchronizer, to do it properly, you could go to under tools and you could have a SMPTE generator plugin and you could send this out to a particular output of your audio interface, and then when you hit play, you can send time code out, and then you could have the other computer synchronized to the time code. What a lot of people do, because they don't have a proper sync box, is just go to the transport, and we go to the project synchronization setup. And what you want to do is to say you want to send a MIDI time code, and you could connect a MIDI interface between the two computers, and ideally you'd want to send MIDI time code, and you'd also want to have the clocks between the two different computers connected, often via like a BNC word clock connection if you have that for your audio interface, and that way the audio clocks can be synchronized. So you have Cubase transmit MIDI time code out to the other computer. The other computer can then be set to receive and look to synchronize to MIDI time code. Then when you hit play in Cubase, the other computer should synchronize. But if you're doing a lot of audio, you would need to get an audio clock signal from one computer to the other computer, or the audio may drift. You see Thomas is saying, sorry for the out-of-field question. There is no out-of-field question. Just ask away. All right, great to see JVI on. Great to see you back. Glad you can make it today. All right. All right, so we see, hi Greg, hope you're doing well. Currently I don't have space where I could put studio monitors for mixing. Does Cubase 12 have a plugin that will allow headphones to simulate monitors? Thanks. So there's nothing that really we don't have anything internal to Cubase that would, kind of mimic. There are some, or I guess I could take that back. There is a program, and we could put this on like our master bus, and this is actually kind of set up to work. I think I have it on here, maybe spatial panner. It's like the Immerse plugin. Let me see if I think I have it installed. Yeah, so there's the Immerse Virtual Studio, and what this is set up to do, and you could buy this on the Steinberg website. You could have either Alan Meyerson Studio or Lursen Mastering Studios, and you could have headphones here, and then you actually take a picture of your ear. There will be some different headphone types, but you could check this out, and this is really, you could do stereo or 5.1, and you could go back and forth. And using headphones, it's kind of simulating this particular environment. So check out the Immerse Virtual Studio, and you can get that directly on the Steinberg online shop. So that'd be a great choice for that. And that could work with headphones. It's set up to actually be their particular rooms, which are highly coveted, and as opposed to like it's going to be like this monitor in your room. So. All right, so we see Cubase X saying, "Evening, Greg. Thanks for his hangouts. You're welcome." All right, so we see a question from Martin Severn. Question, if I'm working on some sound design, let's say, for example, I want to apply a pitch curve over multiple tracks. Is there such a thing as a controller track where you can apply settings that will affect other tracks below it without having to bake everything down, or to have it applied to multiple tracks in a non-destructive way? Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll just do a new project here so we could show you how to do this. Okay, so let's say I just want to I'll just grab some atmospheres for sound design here. All right, so I'm going to have 3 files, and we'll put them on different tracks. Okay, so let's just say we want to, and this could sound really odd and goofy. I'll turn the volume down. So, all right, so let's say at this point I want to select all of the tracks. I think we could do this all at once. And let's go to processes, and let's say, okay, I want to do pitch shift, and I want to pitch shift up. So now we have and as we kind of and if we undo that, this is kind of where we were originally, and then so, and at any time I could just simply select either any of these files independently at any time, and even after saving the project, and come over here and delete all. So, and then we're right back to the original file. So use like the offline processing. So if you want to just hit the F7 key, you could open it up and you could have access to all your plugins and all the processes. You can have that directly available to you, and you could undo if you have multiple processes that you've done. So let's say, okay, I want to pitch shift. I want to run it through a reverb, and I want to also now run it through, let's say, a flanger. So now we listen to it. And I can say, okay, I just want to take the reverb out on all of them. Now I want to take the flanger out. So I could take in and out of order, non-sequentially, non-linearly, right back to where you are. So, get to know the direct offline processing. That will be perfect for that. All right, I'm going to get to some of the questions that were mailed in so we don't run out of time. So I'm going to paste the Zoom that we're going to start in about 24 minutes. Okay. So let me just switch to my Word document here. Okay, so we had a question last week on on Tuesday rather, on kind of lock recording and how to set that up. So I was playing around with it. So what you could do is let's see if it's actually under transport commands. Okay, so if we go to under key commands, so let's go to edit to key commands. We'll see under transport, you can just search for lock, record. I'll just pop over. I think it's going to be under the transport, and then you'll see a lock record. So once this is in, and I've set up the lock record to be activated from my MIDI remote here. Let's see if it's still. So I just set up this command, like this button, to lock record. So when we are in lock record, I will just take this particular track, I'll hit the button to lock record. All right, so now let's say I accidentally hit the space, if I accidentally go to punch out or I hit the space bar, notice that when I hit the space bar, it now says, do you want to continue recording? So when I hit the space bar to stop, it actually gives me a window saying, oh, I didn't mean to hit the space bar. So I'm going to continue recording. And now I intended to hit the space bar, and I'll cancel and stop the recording. So you just need to kind of activate that particular function and assign a key command to it, and then you could lock record, where if you stop, hit the space bar, that it will continue to record and pull up a window to prompt you to just continue recording. So you get kind of a way to continue recording if you accidentally someone hit the space bar or you drop something on it. Okay, so I spent a little bit of time last week on question was, if we have a number of events on an event, or on a single track, how we could increment the colors for multiple events on the same track. So I figured out my Project Logical Editor preset for this. So we'll come over here. Just search for the preset. Okay, so what we want to do is basically start with the first event, before the first event. And we're going to have two pre-processes. One's going to be transport locate next selection, and then we're going to edit. We're going to select all of the events. We're going to take all of the audio and MIDI events that are selected, and then we're going to increment the colors. We're then going to select none of the events and then transport locate next event again, so that if we want to increment the colors of all of these particular events here, I will just hit apply multiple times, and if everything is set up correctly, now I'm going to select the track that I want to do this on, and now it'll just automatically increment the colors on the events one by one. So again, set up for pre-process commands: transport, locate, next event, edit, select all on tracks, and then it's going to select all on the tracks, and then we're going to say take all of these, we're going to take all the audio or MIDI events that are beyond the cursor that are selected because we selected all on the tracks, and then it's going to increment the color. We're going to do edit, select none, transport, locate, next event, so that we could just kind of hit that function repeatedly, and it'll kind of go through and continue to colorize. Okay, so we had a question last week about how to A/B multiple insert chains in the mixer, and I thought of, and I talked about maybe utilizing the mix console functions, but we could also do like effects chain presets. So let's say if I go to this track and I have like an effects chain here, so I will just so let's say I have this effects chain. So what I could do is on the effects chain, I could save effects chain presets. So I saved one as A, and then I saved another as B. So if I come over here, we can now listen to kind of a different effects chain preset. Now, if we wanted to switch this easily between the two, if we go to our media bay on the right hand side, we could go to user presets, and we will say effects chain presets. So if we have both of these saved, I could just drag over A and then say, well, what if B is better? I could drag B over, and I could just switch between multiple effects chain presets. So I say, okay, let's just go to A, and so if you just save it as a preset, you could just drag and drop. And audition quickly between two different chains, and that could be up to 16 different plugins. All right, so we had a question. Hi, Greg. I have a Launchpad Mini hooked up to my desktop. I'd like to assign macros to the 64 pads. Is there a way I can create 2 or 3 bank options, which I can assign all my macros, as I've used up all the buttons for now? Kindly advise. Thanks. Okay, so what you could do, let's say I have, I have like a little Chord Nano control, and it'd be very similar. So once you have this set up and you have like your 64 different functions assigned, you want to take 2 of them away. And what we're going to do is use mapping pages. So if we come directly to the mapping assistant, we'll see this plus sign. So we could have one controller can have multiple kind of almost preset configuration views, and these preset configurations will be mapping assistants. So I'm going to click on plus, and we'll just say this is macros part 2. Sorry for shouting there. Okay, so now as soon as I do that, I can assign different, this kind of clears the palette, and this opens up. Now what I always do with this, so that you don't have to go into the mapping assistant and switch between different mapping pages, is that you could come over here. Let's say, okay, I want to take this button here, And when I go to the mapping page, I think if we go to mapping page actions, you could actually choose to, map to. You could say, okay, I want to go to mapping page 2, or I want to go to a specific mapping page, or you could just say, let's go to next mapping page. So I could apply that to this particular key, and let's say this one I want to be the previous mapping page. So you could have like 62 new functions and keep kind of the same ones for next. So now you could say, when I'm here, we could go, okay, I'm going to hit this particular button from this mapping page, and it will now just take me to like the next mapping page. So this way, so again, go to the mapping page here, click on plus, and then you could take the same exact like configuration here and have multiple functions. So you can see all these different functions that I have for the mapping page. So you could have, like I think 128. I haven't tested how many mapping pages you could have, but I think it's 128 if memory serves me right. And then each of those, but just assign some of the functions so that you could switch between particular mapping pages. So that way you don't have to do this manually, or you could assign like one whole bank to particular mapping pages if you want. And again, that assignment is just going to be under mapping page actions. So anytime you have a mapping page that's created, you could go directly there or go to next or previous mapping page. So that way your 64 buttons could turn into 128, turn into 192, 256, etc. Okay, so I had a question. Hi, Greg. Where are third-party sample attributes stored in MediaBay? Are they included in the audio sample or in the MediaBay database? And I had sent kind of a question about this. Let's say it's just like an audio file. So this is like for sampled loops. Often like what we see if we wanted to, go to loops, and it's not specific to a particular instrument. So if we have written in metadata for particular files, and we could do this just by, going into the attribute inspector. So if you want to put your name or what album or other functions, you could, have any, you could even create your own mapping, so these are available ones. And if you needed to add and create your own attribute type, you could do that as well. And all of these are going to be stored as metadata in the audio file itself. So if you move locations, that will automatically be retained with the audio file. All right, so we had a question. Is there a way I can drag and drop the track archive from MediaBay Right Zone instead of importing it? Please advise. So currently the track, the MediaBay here is intended for media, so like actual audio files, presets, and so there isn't a way that I know of to. I'll just take a quick look just to make sure, but I don't think that. Track archives are going to work, but let's go to the file browser and let's go to desktop. So I don't think that I will export this as a track archive. So export selected tracks. Okay, we'll call it July 28th. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that went to my desktop. Yes, okay. So I'm going to go into MediaBay and I'm just going to refresh my desktop. But I don't think it's going to be one of the media files since it's referencing existing content. So let's come over here to desktop and rescan. Yeah, so it unfortunately isn't one of the media types. I'll pass it along as a feature request. I'll be in Germany next month, so maybe I'll get some time with the team. But currently it isn't draggable from Media Bay. All right, so we just see a comment, a feature request. It'd be great if the drum editor had modern layout like the Beat Designer. Please add more features in drum editor, such as note repeat, pattern creation, etc. So, I think if we have the drum editor that's assigned, so let's come over to so once we're in the drum editor, I think really, it's a very flexible system. There's a lot of people that, can, one is you could have a lot of different functions. Let me just create the drum map. But I think really the intention is you could come over and quickly say, okay, I want my kick, rim shot, let's say kick here, so let's say if I wanted to build like a quick pattern easily enough, I could, so let's say we'll just do a one measure loop here. Right. And just so we make sure my control room is up a little bit here. All right, so I wanted to do like a one measure loop. I think it's really quite easy just to kind of come over, say, okay, I want all right, so let's say I wanted to put so if I wanted to do, let's say, a hi-hat closed and I want to make this like eighth note triplets, that now I could, so let's come over here. All right, and let's say I want to put a snare on beat 3. And let's say I wanted to even change kind of the all right, and then we could even just kind of very easily select, let's say we want to do kind of like a quick shuffle beat. So let's say now I want to look at the velocity of just those selected kicks or those snares. So, you could do, very easily just kind of draw stuff in different polyrhythms. So you say, okay, now I just wanted to do, let's see if I just drag these, but so if you want to do like different swing feels, we say I want 16th notes, I want 32nd note triplets, 128th notes. You can just kind of, do stuff here very easily. You could isolate drums. So there's a lot of great stuff you could do with kind of, typical note repeat stuff that's already available in there. And see also you say that there's a slight latency on, on the Beat Designer plugins. I've never run into that, but let's say if I just wanted to go to Beat Designer, so maybe it's other plugins that are kind of causing your particular latency, but generally there isn't any latency from the Beat Designer plugin. All right, so we had another question regarding a macro that someone saw on an affected mushroom Steinberg video. So let's say, I'll just revert this. All right, so what they wanted to do is to be able to select an event and erase all of the other events so that this will be the only event in that particular amount of time. So this way, if I select this event, anything else that's playing in that particular moment will automatically, and I'll just move it over here. So anything that's playing in that particular moment will get cut off, and only this element will play. So we did this through a project logical editor. So let's go to our setup again. So I think we'll show this. All right, so we want to have it set up. So we're going to take the particular event. We want to set the left and right locators around this event. We're going to split all of the events at that moment, and we're going to take all of our events and then everything that's inside of the cycle and everything that is not selected, we're going to delete. So this way, when I select this particular event, everything that's within this amount of space on all other tracks will be deleted. So if I come over here, did this correctly, it'll just take care of it like that. So if you wanted to isolate a particular event, so let's say I have this event here and I want to erase everything other than that amount of that event in that particular time frame, just come there, and that way that event will become instantly soloed. So again, come over, you want to transport locators to selection, edit split loop. We want to choose delete as our main function. We're going to do container type is equal to events, position is inside the cycle, and the property is not set to is selected, and that will delete all those particular events. All right, and we had another question about if we had input channels in our, let's say if we add a number of input channels, how we could hide particular input channels. So let's say I have a number of input channels here, and we go to our mix console, and the question is, how can I hide certain input channels and hide other input channels? So we saw this in the previous live stream that we could come over here and say, let's go to our input channels, and we could hide all of them. But if we wanted to hide particular ones, how can we do that? We go to the visibility. We only see our stereo out, and this is kind of a goofy workaround. I'm trying to understand the logic of it. I think I may understand the logic, but if you want to hide, let's say, the last 4 output channels, what you could do is just take all the input channels and put them into right. Okay, and as soon as we put these into right, and I know this is an awkward workaround, they'll all show up. So I'll just take these all out of right. And at this point, we could choose to hide particular input and output channels. So that's how we could get them to show up in the list. Select them, enable right, and then you could turn right automation off directly at that point. And then we could have specific input channels visible and others not. Okay, so we're right at time. I'm going to post the, thank you for all the wonderful questions. I'm going to post the Zoom meetup link one more time, and then we're going to go ahead and migrate over to Zoom. Sorry we didn't get through all the questions, but let's go ahead, and if you have a question, you could go ahead and ask on the Zoom. But let me go ahead and I'm going to paste the Zoom link. And again, you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Sorry we didn't get to everything today. Thanks for all the great questions, and we'll go ahead and start on our Zoom. And we will go ahead and start the meeting. All right, so we see Peter from Montreal. I'll turn my camera off for now. All right, we have Jan from Stockholm, Uno Memento from Finland. All right, Brian Sawyer Sr., great to have you on. All right, I think we hear Brian. All right, we have Jay entering. All right, we see Jan. Good to see you, Peter. No problem. We have Nick. All right, we have Lawrence Koch. Give it a couple more minutes before we wrap up the. All right, we have Soren. Hey, Uno. Glad you can make it today.
It's fine. It's about 15 degrees Celsius. No rain. No rain. Little. Very little. Okay. Tomorrow to the weekend will be more from our perspective. And you? 40 degrees Celsius and raining all the time. Okay.
All right, we'll give it a couple more minutes before I wrap up the Zoom, before I wrap up the Hangout. I'll post one more time the Zoom link. All right, we have John Costigan.
36 Celsius where I am, Jan. Where do you live? Canada, Montreal. What are you up to there, Nick?
Yeah, Nick looks too happy.
Cheers, Nick.
All right, I'll wrap up the live stream here in just a minute or so. He's so happy he went off camera. Is that Uno? I think maybe it was Uno. Yeah.
Yeah, his voice is a bit low. I don't have yet.
All right, so I'm going to end the live stream here, and we'll migrate. So again, we'll do the next live stream on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. All right, so let me just close this out.